Center of Attention, written by Majestic Teach 6677. Many sci-fi stories explain how first contact occurred after some alien race detected the first FTL flight of another race. Unfortunately, those stories were generally wrong. Detection of an FTL drive still depends on good old-fashioned light and radio waves. So to detect a drive, you need a ship or station in a system or some sort of observation drone. Otherwise, you need to wait for the telltale signature to reach you. The catch is that FTL signatures degrade once they get 250 light-years away from the source and fade into background radiation of the universe. It turns out that the old guess that there's life out in the universe was correct, but it more typically occurs over 1,000 light-years away from each other. That's well beyond the max limits of normal FTL travel, which tops out at around 350 light-years of single-person craft and exploration probes. Standard jumps of cargo and passenger vessels are more in the range of 150 light-years. Humanity was growing and establishing colonies in another system, just within 3 to 4 jumps of Sol. There were more than enough systems to explore and locations to establish colonies in that range that we hadn't yet pushed exploration much further out. That changed when the outer beacon of Alpha Glacius detected an FTL signature, 550 light-years away from Earth. This system got its name when the exploration team found a calm ice world with an atmosphere. The atmosphere was breathable, very little weather to speak of, tectonically stable, and aside from average temperature of minus 50 C, made for an ideal colony site, as long as you weren't the outdoors type. We started efforts for colonization and jumped a single team to begin building efforts. About 100 people equipped to be self-sufficient for a full year. When an FTL signature was detected only 2 months into the mission, it caused a bit of confusion and a stir. Taking a closer look, the team determined that it was likely a sensor glitch and not an actual detection, as the signature was strange and highly degraded. That changed 3 months later, when a series of FTL signatures were detected. A grand total of 3 within an hour period. Again degraded. That's strange, but undeniable. A mad scramble was made to triangulate the signals, and the colonists identified the system of origin, approximately 245 light-years out, explaining why they were degraded and barely identifiable. The news rocked us all, but there was also the sober reality that a signal was well over 200 years old. The signal might come from a system that was explored but uninhabited, or a world or alien civilization that was now dead. All that was proven was that sometime in the past an alien civilization had visited a system nearly 800 light-years away from Earth. There were calls for an exploration ship, but the colonists were impatient. They turned their tight beam FTL communicator at the system and broadcast a series of simple mathematical equations to see if they would get someone's attention. They did. Less than 30 seconds after sending their FTL communications, someone on the other end responded. The message was garbled and made no sense, but it was clearly of intelligent origin. On the third attempt, the colonists perfected the mathematical equations with a simple message of our own. Greetings from humanity. We extend friendship to our new neighbors and are excited to learn that we are not alone in the galaxy. That made all the difference. Sending them a message with a language they had never seen, along with the mathematical equations, triggered a response answering our mathematical equations, and we slowly built a translation matrix. The process took time, as FTL communications are essentially limited to ancient Earth dial-up internet speeds, and we aren't talking about the speedy 56K connections. Communications are basically limited to text data only, as even the simple images are too dense in bits, and whoever was on the other end lacked codecs and file formatting information to interpret the data. And who knew if they used displays of similar type and color range to ours? After a few days, both sides were able to send messages of reasonable complexity and translation accuracy. We found out the first 2 messages from the aliens translated as follows. Who is this, and why are you sending a message without proper addressing? And what the hell are you doing in system 79234.67? Is this some sort of idiotic prank? Yes, Yes, we can do simple math. FTL communication bandwidth is limited. Tell us who you are and what is this all about before we report you to the authorities and block your transmissions. It turns out we contacted our closest neighbors, the Catalians. The system we were communicating with had no inhabitants, instead being an ideal location for the Catalians to install an FTL communications relay. The FTL signatures we discovered were made by maintenance crews coming through and performing regular repairs. Until our contact, they believed themselves the only sapient race in this part of the galaxy, with the majority of inhabited space starting some 3,000 light-years away. To say that the Catalians were excited to have neighbors was an understatement, and they were already wanting to meet for establishment of cultural and trade exchanges. Due to their distance from the rest of the inhabited galaxy, trade was limited to luxury goods, tourism, and cultural information. Together, we could not only build trade between our two peoples, we would be able to create joint trade stations to encourage more contact with the greater galaxy. We humans were equally over the moon to learn that we weren't alone in the universe, yet saddened to learn that it was dumb luck that landed us in the boonies. While the government scrambled to put together a mission to the Catalians, we were frustrated to learn that the closest diplomatic outpost for the great galaxy was over 5,500 light-years away. Despite the invitation to have a representative join the next meeting of the Galactic Federation, there would be no way to get there in time. FTL communications may be close to instant, travel is not. Even with a relay of fully fueled and ready scout vessels, it would be at least 15 jumps to get there. The Catalians had an answer for us. While our standard FTL drives operated within the same limits as the rest of the galaxy, there was a modification which could be made that would extend the reach of a small vessel to nearly 7,500 light-years in a single jump. The catch is that the vessel would be very mass-limited and only have room for a single person, and the ship would need at least a week of maintenance upon arrival before it would be able to enter FTL again. As a sociologist with a pilot's certification, I don't understand all of the physics behind the modifications. Yet the engineers who saw the solution screamed out in agony of frustration. The situation was one of those stupid brain teasers, where you need to sort out and find the lightest marble, and you have only a certain number of actions to do it. When you look at the problem, it seems impossible, and even after days of puzzling over it, you can't figure it out the answer, so you give up and move on. Then you mention the teaser to a friend. They quickly say something like, "The marble sorting, all you need to do is this," and the answer is so simple and staring you in the face that you feel like a fool for missing it. That's how the engineers preparing my shuttle explained it, while also assuring me that the theory was sound and I wouldn't find myself crashing into the middle of a star unexpectedly. I'd like to say that I was selected for the mission for being one of the best and brightest. The truth is, I happened to be the closest person to the shipyard with the right skill set. My mother had been a starship mechanic, so I learned the basics of repairs growing up along with getting a pilot certification before entering university. I used my pilot's license and wrenching skills to help pay for my education. So when I joined the Terran Interstellar Relations Department, I was quickly utilized as someone who could be sent out to quickly answer disputes between colonies. Honestly, while I had a good track record, most of my job was to lower the temperature of disputes until the experienced negotiators could get out and resolve the problem. In all, I had less than 5 years on the job and had only resolved one dispute of my own. But this flight to represent humanity needed someone with special skills. A diplomat who was also a pilot, and preferably one who could do repairs to a ship. Right skills, right place, right time. Thanks, Mom. I boarded the ship, which looked like a glorified lifeboat with an FTL engine stamped on the back with both trepidation and excitement. Despite the assurances by the engineers and plenty of lab tests, this would be the first flight ever with a long-distance modification. As much excitement and youthful exuberance drove me to accept the mission instantly and without regard to the dangers. There was a rational bit in the back of my brain that was a little scared to be flying in an unproven vessel. My cargo was limited. The Catalians recommended we bring a small gift to the Galactic Federation, which would be added to the Galactic Museum of Sapience. We selected a small moon rock gathered by Neil Armstrong for the moon. It seemed fitting to present the symbol of our first steps into space, and so we joined the great galaxy in peace and curiosity. The second part of my assigned cargo was a data library of humanity's history, culture, and technological achievements, along with dozens of empty data drives to procure as much information on the greater galactic community as possible. This filled most of my oversized suitcase, leaving room for only 3 days of clothing. I hoped that they had some sort of laundry service available, or I'd likely reveal to the galaxy what a ripe human smelled like. The cleaning module on the ship only handled 1 day's worth of clothing at a time, and the supplies would run out in just a few days after I arrived at the diplomatic station, where I was expected to spend at least a month. Yeah, thanks Mom for yelling at me about clean underwear, I thought to myself as I piloted out and lined up for the jump to FTL. I'm more concerned about being caught wandering around in dirty laundry than blowing up mid-flight in an untested ship. This is Terra 1, entering FTL in 30 seconds, I called out over the comm. I'm just extending our giant leap for mankind a little further. Keep a light on. I'll be home soon with stories to share. Safe travels, Terra 1, came the return call from the traffic control. I recognized the voice as coming from my boss, Julia. Please return with some alien cookies for us to try. Inquiring minds need to know how Grandma's chocolate chip cookies compare to the rest of the galaxy. Probably not the exchange historians really wanted for the history books, but Julia's grandmother made some truly killer cookies, and it gave me something to look forward to on my return. I smiled as I made the final preparations for the jump to FTL, spinning down the sublight engines and then flipping the switch to enter FTL. I spent the next 10 days traveling across the galaxy, restless. I kept wondering what sort of beings I would meet and how different alien cultures would be from us. The information provided by the Catalians made clear that the galaxy was largely at peace and fervently believed in sapient rights that aligned with humanity's. So I would be meeting friends, not hostilities. Mom likely wouldn't have approved my laundry schedule, as I wore the same clothes 3 days in a row to conserve my limited detergent supplies. That said, I made sure I wore clean clothes and was freshly showered for my last day of travel to the Galactic Federation outpost, even if they were hidden underneath my spacesuit. After all, flight regulations required me to be in my suit for the final sublight journey to the outpost. On my final day of travel, I exited from FTL and marveled as I approached the diplomatic outpost. It looked like a graceful sweeping tower on a floating island out of a fantasy novel, both seemingly familiar, if fantastical, and yet utterly strange and alien at the same time. I was routed to a docking bay on the underside of the island, which upon getting close felt more industrial and bulky the way most space stations are. Again, familiar, yet also strange as the sizes and shapes of the docking bays varied as much as the designs of the ships I observed on the way in. The Catalians had provided the Galactic Federation with a translation matrix, so the electronic voice guiding me in for a landing was clear and understandable. That said, the cadence of the voice was clearly not AI. The unnatural gaps in speech felt like someone on the other end was speaking in a truly foreign language, and the translator was having some difficulties. The thought occurred to me that I would likely need to keep my choice of words simple until we could all better train the translation matrix. At least, breathing wouldn't be a problem, as I was informed that the air in the station was similar to Earth, at altitudes of just under 2,500 meters above sea level. It would be a little thin, but nothing which would induce altitude sickness or other issues. The landing went smoothly, aided by the fact that they guided me to an oversized docking bay that was 3 times larger than my ship. Once the outer doors closed, I observed some vents and the walls opened up. Shortly afterwards, the electronic voice informed me that the bay was pressurized and I was free to exit my ship. After stepping out, I quickly removed the helmet from my spacesuit and took in a deep breath of alien air. It was a little disappointing, as it simply smelled fresh and with a slight metallic tang to it, like every other cargo and docking area I had visited in Terran space. While the air may have been disappointing, the bay was not. The bay used a combination of smooth metallic wall panels and infra panels that again seemed familiar at first glance, but the alloys used were not. Most of the panels were polished with a slightly purplish hue, with a series of more greenish-tinted at eye level. They were longer than what you would see in a human-made bay, probably about half a meter tall but 2 meters long. Again, similar and yet completely alien at the same time. I wondered why they chose the long panels rather than square or larger rectangular panels the way we typically did. The info panels had slightly 3D displays, so that the characters and icons, all truly alien to me, seemed to be slightly raised out of the wall. One of them altered to give me a message in bright green against a navy blue background. Welcome to Galactic Federation Outpost Serenity. You have been provided quarters in the diplomatic wing on the 3rd level. Proceed to the nearest lift, and a guide will meet you upon arrival on the 3rd floor. Please press the symbol on the lift if the panel does not shift to match your language. Should you be interested and have suitable time to prepare, you are invited to an informal gathering in the Arboretum in 2 Terran hours. The official welcoming ceremony begins in 4 Terran hours. I was excited and determined to be ready for the informal gathering and hoped that I would also have a bit of time to explore the outpost before attending. I stepped up to the airlock door, and a small panel on the door altered from 2 unknown symbols to a yellow open and a blue close button. Again, so familiar, yet so strange with the choice of colors. I took a deep breath, pressed on, and grabbed onto my rolling suitcase, with my helmet tucked under my other arm. I waited for the door to open. I stepped out into chaos. The familiar chaos of a spaceport with people rushing around to catch flights, meet friends, looking to find a vendor for food, or just head towards baggage claim. Familiar and yet completely strange, as I recognized none of the beings, and there wasn't anything close to resembling a human in sight. I just stood there as a smile grew on my lips, and I took in the sights and sounds of truly alien people moving around me. It was a dream come true, and a sight straight out of an old science fiction novel. There were creatures of all shapes and sizes, from those that would barely reach my knee to those that towered above me. I spotted beings that were squid-like, insect-like, furry, brightly colored, dull-colored, multicolored, some with eye stalks, many without any obvious eyes but having no issue moving around fellow beings. Some beings on floating platforms contained in tanks of liquid, and other beings I couldn't quite tell as they wore fully sealed suits, and sometimes exhaled strange colored gases. I was amazed by the sight, but decided I needed to get to the lift and my guide. I tried to step forward into the corridor when some of the aliens near me stopped and looked at me. Other beings bumped into them and made startled noises until they too caught sight of me. Slowly, the wave of activity halted, as everyone within sight stopped moving and turned their eyes, eye stalks, or whatever might pass as some sort of visual receptor towards me. "Hello?" I said tentatively. After my voice spoke out, translation boxes all around me started to make chirps, imitate mandible clicks, generate beeps, and form melodic or harsh noises, as my words of greeting was translated into dozens of languages. I stood there waiting and looking hopefully at the gathered crowd. But nobody said anything. They just stared. Worried that something was wrong, I quickly glanced down and gave myself a once-over. Nothing seemed out of place or disconnected on my spacesuit. My reflection in the mirrored visor of my helmet showed that aside from my hair being a little messy, there wasn't anything wrong. No smudges of food or an embarrassing bit of snot dripping. Everything seemed fine. I looked back out as everyone continued to gawk at me. None of them made a sound or responded. They just all watched me. As I stood there being stared at, a thought occurred to me. Am I on a diplomatic mission? Or was I sent to be sacrificed as the next high school weirdo, I wondered. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.